everyone, and welcome to another review. This time I will be reviewing the e.l.f. Baked Eyeshadow Palette in the shade Texas. Now e.l.f. has come out with 4 of these baked eyeshadow palettes. They're called California, NYC, Texas, and Seattle, and Texas is actually the only one that I own, but I do own all but for one of the baked eyeshadow singles, and I have reviewed those in the past. This eyeshadow palette comes with a huge mirror, as you can see over here, and with 10 different shades. Now for the Texas one, the selection is pretty neutral. As you can see, there is like a shimmery white, then a champagne, a pink, a rose gold, then another more bronzy gold, a mustard gold, a taupe, a deeper coppery shade, and then 2 brown shades, one deeper than the other. This one is deeper. I actually really like the shade selection in this one, and you're able to get very pretty neutral looks with it. As you can notice from the look of the palette, you can expect some powderiness with it, as you can see from these shades. So you know, it will look a little bit messy after some time of use, and I have had this for about 6 months. But all in all, I would say this is a pretty good palette to travel with, and I have actually just traveled with it this past weekend, and I particularly enjoyed the big mirror over here and the convenience of having a big mirror and being able to have the shades close by, so that kind of speeds up the whole makeup application process. The size of the individual pans is not very large, as you can see them here compared to a quarter. So they're slightly smaller than a quarter. You can see this is the eyeshadow and that's the quarter. Slightly smaller than a quarter. Now, previous to ordering this palette, I had tried out the individual e.l.f. baked eyeshadows, and I have to say those are much nicer, both in texture and in the way they apply. I don't really notice a lot of difference in the staying power, but definitely pigmentation wise and texture wise, those are much better. They're quite a bit softer than these ones. These ones are quite hard in this palette, and you don't get as much color payoff from them. So going over to the live swatches, by touching these you will notice that they're not quite as buttery soft as the single eyeshadows are. So this is the first one, the kind of shimmery white, and I find that this one works very well as a highlight. Then the champagne shade, and then this is probably the weakest color out of the whole palette. This pink one, you can see I barely got any on my finger, and I have tried to use this in a variety of ways, and it's barely noticeable on my finger. I find that the best way to get it to show up on your eyelid is if you use a fluffy brush and really scrub into it. So on my pinky I have this kind of rose gold shade. And finally, this other gold shade, oh my god, on my thumb. So let me offer you a close-up of what those shades look like. This is the shimmery white, the first shade. This is the champagne. This is the pink that barely shows up. This is the rose gold, and this is the other gold right at the end. So let's swatch them on the skin, no primer. The first one, the white shade. Now the champagne shade, which comes pretty nice on the skin. Now the pink, which is basically inexistent. The rose gold, pretty nice. And the other more classic shade of gold. So as you can see, the pigmentation is actually not bad at all on all of these except for the pink one, which is basically non-existent. So let's get some wet swatches on here. This is the first one, the white shade, this one here. As you can see, a lot more pigmented, wet. Now let's go over to the champagne shade. Yeah, much better pigmentation on that one as well. As you can see, the dry versus the wet one. I really like this champagne shade as an all over the lid shade. I think it's very pretty. And I tend to use this shimmery white as a highlight for the brow bone or for the inner eye. Also very pretty. Okay, moving on to the problematic pink shade. Let's see if I can get it to show up. See, even wet, it's not really there. Let's rub some more. Yeah. So, barely any color. Well, I guess now it's okay, but not really a grand shade. Yeah, it's really pretty if you do get it to show up, but it will need quite a bit of work, and you will probably always need to apply this one, the pink one, wet, because otherwise it just does not show up at all. Let's see this rose gold shade. So see, that is a whole different story in terms of pigmentation, the rose gold one compared to the pink one. The rose gold one is actually pretty nicely pigmented, even in the dry swatch. Of course, much more intense than the wet swatch. And now the final shade out of this first row, kind of this more classic kind of gold. So there you have it. Again, very nice pigmentation. So these last two, I would say, are the most pigmented from the first row, which would be the last two over here, the gold. The first two are okay, and I have used them dry quite a bit, and I would say they work very well. This one is a highlight, and this one is an all over the lid color. It's very, very pretty. So if you put the champagne all over the lid, and then you work in some of the browns over here and the taupe, you get a very, very pretty kind of neutral, timeless look. So I really do like that. So from this first row of colors, I would definitely say that the only disappointment is the pink one. And I did do a look at some point with the pink one all over the lid, and then some browns and taupes from this second row of colors in the crease, and it was super, super pretty. The only problem is you will need to work with this pink one wet and rub it quite a bit in order to get it to show up on the lid. So very pretty neutral colors. So moving over to the live swatches of the second row of colors in the Texas palette. Let's see, first this gold, which is, oh man, my thumb. This is a very special kind of gold because it's very bright and it's kind of a mustard kind of gold. So very unusual. I do have a lot of gold, but none quite like this one. Then this taupey color over here. I think this has to be my favorite from the entire palette. I think it's super, super pretty. I particularly like applying this in the crease. It's very, very pretty. Now medium brown, bronze kind of shade. And then a darker brown. And I'm not sure that you can pick up on this on the finger. This last brown over here, as opposed to all the other colors you've seen thus far, this one is actually a matte. And so is this other brown, which is just a little bit darker. So the one on the pinky is a little bit darker than the one on my ring finger. Now going over to a close-up of the colors. This is the darkest brown here on the pinky. This is the one right next to it. And then this coppery kind of color, the taupe that I like so much. And here it is on my index, that very special shade of gold that I was mentioning. Okay, so let's see how these swatch on the hand. Okay, so we're starting with the gold. not too bad. Not too bad at all, actually. And the taupey that I like so much. Wow. Beautiful. And great pigmentation on that one. Really pretty. Really, really pretty. Then this is the coppery shade. Very good pigmentation as well. And then the first of the two browns. So as you can see, this one is matte. All the other shades in the palette up to this point were shimmery, including the first row. And then the other brown, which is also a matte, and it is just a hair darker and maybe a little bit cooler in tone as well. So I really do like the fact that these last two colors, which also happen to be the darkest, are mattes. I think that gives you a lot of freedom in terms of the kind of looks that you can achieve with them. And I will definitely say that this last row is better pigmented than the first one, mainly because with e.l.f. somehow the darker colors tend to be better pigmented than the lighter ones. And I do have to say, this taupe is just gorgeous, gorgeous. I mean, all of them are really pretty, but I am just in love with this taupe color over here. So really pretty. As you saw, I just barely touched the colors, no primer. So really good pigmentation. Now for some wet swatches, beginning with the gold color. Yeah, so as you can see, wet, it's really intensified, and I think in the wet swatch you can really recognize this kind of mustardy shade. I think it has a little bit of a green undertone, if that makes any sense. So a mustardy gold here. Quite unique, I would say. With the taupe. Ooh, beautiful, really pretty. And the coppery shade next to it. Yeah. Also really, really nice pigmentation. Very pretty as well. Okay, and now the final two shades. The lighter of the browns. Ooh. Nice. And the darker of the two browns. Yeah, so you can see that the darker brown is actually cooler in shade, whereas the lighter brown is a little bit warmer. But very, very nice pigmentation. And as I was saying, all the colors except for these last two, so dry versus wet, are shimmery, actually quite shimmery, but these last two ones are matte. And I really do like that, especially since in the singles, there are no matte shades currently, so really pretty. So all in all, my thoughts on these, I would probably give this palette an 8 out of 10 because I really do like the color selection. You can get wonderful neutral looks with it, and these looks can be very appropriate for work or for school. They can be very decent for the daytime, but then again, you know, the more you incorporate from these last two darkest shades, the more intense and dramatic those looks can get. So I like the fact that you can get a range of looks out of this palette. And it's very convenient that you kind of have all the shades you would need for a look in one palette, with the highlight over here and the champagne shade, and then, you know, some darker colors as well. Definitely the pink one is a dud. I mean, it is workable if you really want to make it work, but yeah, that's not a very good shade in terms of pigmentation, although the color is really pretty, but the pigmentation is just pretty much non-existent, so that is a minus point. And most of these shades are shimmery. Actually, what you will get from this pink shade if you apply it dry on your skin is just you know, glitters, some glitters, nothing else but that. But they do have these last two matte shades, which kind of saves the day. It's also very convenient with the mirror. So overall, I do like this palette. I think the quality of these eyeshadows is not quite up to par with the single baked eyeshadows, but I think it's still a very convenient palette for traveling. And when I travel, I do gravitate towards this one palette because it gives me the possibility to achieve a range of very pretty neutral looks, and I don't have to worry about carrying all these individual shades and possibly forgetting one and then ruining the chances of me getting a nice look out of it. So it's convenient, it's compact, but I decided against purchasing more of these palettes because I do think that the single eyeshadows are better quality, and I found the color selection most appealing in this version. So overall, it's worth a try. It's available for $10 on the e.l.f. website. And if you're interested in it, I would definitely say check it out, especially if you can get one of those very frequent coupons that will give you 50% off. So for $5, it's definitely worth a try. So I hope that you enjoyed this review and that it was helpful to you. And thank you very much for tuning in. I'll see you next time. Bye!